What if the key to unlocking hidden realms of power was not found in what you consume, but in what you refrain from consuming? Imagine a doorway that has always been there, but one that only reveals itself when you stop feeding the body and allow the soul to speak. For thousands of years, mystics, saints, and seekers have whispered of this secret, that fasting is not merely about abstaining from food, but about entering into a dialogue with the invisible forces that shape existence. Throughout history, kingdoms have risen and fallen, civilizations have thrived and vanished, but the practice of fasting has persisted like a golden thread woven through every tradition. From the desert hermits of early Christianity who starved themselves into visions of heaven, to the yogis of India who harnessed prana by abstaining from earthly indulgence, to the prophets of old who fasted before receiving divine revelations, fasting has always been more than an act of discipline. It has been a portal. But what exactly is this mysterious power? Why would denying the body its most basic need awaken something higher in us? Science today speaks of detoxification, cellular repair, and heightened clarity, but the ancients spoke of purification, illumination, and transcendence. They believed that when the body grows light, the spirit grows strong. To fast is to silence the voice of matter so that the whispers of eternity may be heard. In this video, we will journey into the spiritual power of fasting, not just as a health practice, but as a sacred ritual. We will explore its ancient roots, the philosophical principles behind it, and the profound mysteries it unlocks within the human soul. You will learn why sages treated fasting as a form of alchemy, transforming base instincts into refined awareness. You will also discover how to apply this ancient wisdom practically in your own life, so that fasting becomes not deprivation, but empowerment. Stay with me, for what you are about to learn is not just about food or hunger, it is about rediscovering a forgotten key to the higher worlds. Fasting is as old as human consciousness itself. It appears not as a cultural trend or a passing ritual, but as a timeless practice present in nearly every spiritual tradition. In the deserts of Egypt, the early hermits who would later be known as the Desert Fathers spoke of fasting as the armor of the soul. To them, the stomach was the doorway through which both angels and demons passed. If you could close that doorway to the lower appetites, you opened it to higher ones. In the East, fasting was never merely about withholding food, it was about aligning with cosmic law. The yogis of India practiced tapas, a Sanskrit word that means heat or austerity. Tapas was the inner fire generated when one disciplined the body, and fasting was among the highest forms of this fire. Through it, they believed one could burn impurities, both physical and karmic. The Buddha himself fasted for long stretches before finding the middle way, realizing that fasting to the point of self-destruction was not liberation, but neither was indulgence. Yet even within that balance, fasting remained a sacred key. The Quran describes fasting as a means of attaining taqwa, an inner awareness of the divine. In Islam, Ramadan is not merely a month of avoiding food and drink during daylight hours, but a time to quiet the animal instincts so that the spirit may come forward. The Prophet Muhammad fasted frequently outside Ramadan as well, using fasting as a spiritual discipline that sharpened his connection to God. Judaism, too, holds fasting as a pillar of atonement. On Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, Jews fast to humble the body before the Eternal. In the Hebrew Scriptures, fasting often preceded visions, revelations, or acts of repentance. Moses fasted 40 days before receiving the 10 Commandments, just as Jesus would later fast 40 days in the wilderness before beginning his ministry. The number 40 in sacred tradition symbolizes transformation, trial, and the passage from one state of being to another, and fasting was often the vehicle for this change. In the philosophy of Hermeticism and the mystery schools of the ancient world, fasting was preparation for initiation. Candidates were often deprived of both food and sleep before entering sacred rites, the purpose being to weaken the ties to the material world so that the subtle body could awaken. They knew that when the body hungers, the soul remembers. What is remarkable is not just the universality of fasting, but the unanimity of its interpretation. Across cultures, across languages, across thousands of years, fasting is always linked to purification, vision, and power. The outer act of abstaining from food conceals the inner act of refining perception. Food ties us to earth, but fasting reminds us we are not only creatures of soil and flesh, we are beings of light and spirit. So when we speak of fasting, we are not speaking merely of diet or health. We are speaking of one of the most ancient technologies of the soul, a discipline that prepared prophets to speak, sages to see, and seekers to awaken. To understand fasting historically is to realize that it was never about starvation. It was always about transformation. To understand the spiritual power of fasting, we must first look at the subtle relationship between body, mind, and spirit. The body is like a dense instrument, tuned primarily to the physical world. The mind is the bridge, vibrating between material impulses and higher inspirations. The spirit, however, is like a hidden flame, quiet and easily drowned out by the noise of the body's demands. Most of us live under the rule of appetite. Hunger speaks, and we obey. Desire whispers, and we follow. The body becomes the master, while the spirit remains silent in the background. Fasting reverses this order. By deliberately withholding from the body what it craves most, we disrupt its dominance. We dethrone it from its throne of command and give space for the spirit to rise. Think of it like a candle flame flickering in daylight. As long as the sun shines, the flame is invisible. But when the sun sets, the flame is revealed in its brilliance. In the same way, the constant feeding of the body is like the blinding sun, it hides the spirit. But when fasting begins, the light of the body dims, and the flame of the spirit becomes visible. On a physiological level, fasting changes the chemistry of the body. Energy normally used for digestion is freed, clarity sharpens, and heightened awareness emerges. But beyond this biology lies a more profound alchemy. Hunger creates a tension between flesh and soul. This tension is like the string of a bow, stretched, it holds great potential. Mystics discovered that this potential could be directed upward, awakening visions, intuition, and heightened states of consciousness. Ancient teachers often described fasting as lightening the vessel. The body, weighed down by constant consumption, becomes heavy like a clay jar filled with stones. But remove those stones, remove the excess food, the indulgence, and the jar grows lighter, more transparent. Light begins to shine through. This is why fasting is universally linked with clarity, vision, and revelation. It clears the fog. But fasting is not only about absence, it is about presence. In silence, you hear sounds you never noticed. In darkness, you see stars that were always there. In hunger, you sense the subtle nourishment of spirit that has always been feeding you from within. Many mystics spoke of a hidden manna, an invisible food that sustains the soul when the body is empty. The yogis called it prana, the life force. Christian mystics spoke of the bread of heaven. Taoist adepts spoke of absorbing the subtle breath of the cosmos. Different names, same mystery. When the stomach is empty, another source of nourishment becomes known. This is why fasting was often practiced before sacred acts, before prayer, before vision quests, before initiation rites. It was not a punishment to the body, but a preparation of the soul. Just as one sharpens a blade before battle, fasting sharpens perception before entering the mysteries. And yet, fasting is not about escaping the body. It is about reordering the hierarchy of being. When you fast, you remind the body that it is the servant, not the master. You remind the mind that it must listen not only to instinct, but to inspiration. And you remind the spirit that it is the true king, long forgotten, now enthroned again. In this way, fasting is not deprivation, it is liberation. If in the first stage fasting lightens the body and awakens the spirit, in the second stage it reveals paradoxes, mysteries that seem contradictory, yet hold profound truth. One of these paradoxes is that fasting weakens the flesh but strengthens the will. The body may tremble, the stomach may groan, yet something deeper grows unshakable. Each time you resist the call of appetite, you polish the mirror of self-mastery. You discover that you are not the slave of impulse, but the guardian of choice. The mystics knew that this mastery was not merely about food, it was symbolic of every desire, every passion. If you can command the simplest craving, you can command the greatest temptation. Another paradox is that fasting creates emptiness yet fills you with presence. Hunger is a void, a hollow space within. But in that emptiness, awareness expands. The Sufis would say, when the stomach is empty, the heart is full. They believed fasting opened a space where divine presence could dwell. The absence of material food allowed for the presence of spiritual food. Fasting also transforms time. When we are constantly eating, we are constantly tied to cycles of preparation, consumption, digestion. Our days orbit around meals like planets orbit a sun. But when we fast, those cycles dissolve. Time becomes more fluid, moments feel elongated, and a new rhythm, quieter, more subtle, emerges. Many mystics reported that in fasting, prayer deepened, meditation stretched effortlessly, and nights felt like days of vision. There is also the paradox of weakness becoming power. The physical frailty that fasting sometimes brings was not seen by the ancients as failure, but as a doorway. They believed that in the breaking of the body, the soul steps through. Just as a seed must crack before life bursts forth, so too must the shell of appetite weaken before the spirit awakens. Yet, the ancients were also careful to warn of imbalance. The Buddha himself nearly destroyed his body with severe fasting before realizing that the spirit does not awaken in extremes. The middle way was his answer, a path of balance, where fasting is not starvation, but refinement. In Hermetic philosophy, extremes were always to be avoided, for they bind the soul instead of freeing it. Thus, fasting was a tool, not a torment, a ladder, not a chain. Perhaps the most mysterious aspect of fasting is its ability to alter perception of the unseen. Many spiritual seekers throughout history have reported visions, dreams, or encounters during fasting. Why? Because fasting shifts the frequency of awareness. Imagine a radio, constantly tuned to one station because of static. When fasting reduces the noise of the body, suddenly new stations can be heard, new frequencies perceived. These are the whispers of intuition, the guidance of spirit, the echoes of the eternal. And so, we see fasting not merely as abstinence, but as a key that opens doors within ourselves and perhaps even beyond ourselves. It is a mystery that humbles the body but glorifies the soul, a practice that has endured precisely because it touches something eternal in the human condition. To fast is to remember that we are more than flesh. To fast is to recall that there is a hidden strength waiting in silence, in emptiness, in surrender. It is one thing to speak of fasting as a mystical key, but another to bring it into lived experience. For those who seek to unlock its power, it is vital to approach fasting not as punishment, but as a sacred practice, a dialogue with body, mind, and spirit. The first principle is intention. Before any fast, ask yourself, why am I fasting? If it is only to cleanse the body, you will gain health. If it is to quiet the mind, you will gain clarity. But if it is to awaken the spirit, you will gain revelation. Intention sets the tone. It is like aiming an arrow, the clearer the aim, the truer the flight. Start gently. The sages rarely advised novices to leap into severe fasting. Instead, they recommended gradual steps. Begin by fasting from sunrise to sunset, taking only water. Notice the sensations, not just the hunger, but the emotions, the thoughts, the subtle shifts in perception. Journaling during a fast can be powerful, as it captures insights that often arise in moments of emptiness. Another technique is the conscious fast. Here, the abstaining is not only from food, but also from distractions, from noise, idle speech, excessive activity. In silence and stillness, the fasting deepens. Even a few hours of combining food abstinence with meditation or prayer can yield profound results. Breath becomes your ally. When hunger surges, sit, close your eyes, and take slow, deliberate breaths. Ancient yogis discovered that prana, the life force, can be drawn through breath as a substitute for food. Each breath can remind you that you are nourished not only by bread, but by the subtle energy of the cosmos. For those ready to go deeper, a water fast of 24 to 48 hours can be transformative. Beyond that, extended fasts should be guided by experience or under supervision, as the line between purification and harm is delicate. Remember, fasting is not self-destruction. It is self-discovery. Obstacles will arise. The body will cry out with cravings, the mind will whisper doubts, the will may falter. When this happens, remember the teaching of the mystics: every hunger pang is not an enemy, but a teacher. Each craving that you endure is like a chain broken. The discomfort itself becomes the fire in which your spirit is tempered. You may also practice partial fasts. Abstaining from certain foods, like heavy meats, sugar, or stimulants, while keeping the diet simple and light, can mimic the effects of fasting without full abstinence. Many traditions use this method during preparation for ceremonies, treating it as a purification rite. Above all, treat fasting as sacred time. Create a space, light a candle, keep silence, read from sacred texts, meditate. Approach fasting as you would approach a temple, for in truth, the temple is your own body, and fasting is the ritual that cleanses its inner altar. When practiced with reverence, fasting can heighten awareness, sharpen intuition, and awaken subtle perceptions. Over time, it may even change your relationship with food, with desire, and with the body itself. You begin to realize that food is not your master, but your servant, and that your true nourishment comes from something eternal. Fasting is far more than an act of abstaining from food. It is a sacred practice, a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, a tool that has been revered by mystics, prophets, and seekers across the ages. Through fasting, the body grows light, the mind grows clear, and the spirit awakens. It is a journey of self-mastery, a refinement of perception, and a portal to hidden realms of consciousness. We have seen that fasting is not punishment, nor mere ritual, it is transformation. It dethrones the body's cravings, strengthens the will, and opens the doors to higher awareness. From the deserts of Egypt to the Himalayan mountains, from the ancient temples of Greece to the fasting practices of saints and sages, this discipline has endured because it touches something eternal within us. The hunger of the body becomes the nourishment of the soul, the emptiness of the stomach becomes the fullness of perception. As you reflect on this practice, remember that fasting is most powerful when approached with reverence and intention. Begin slowly, observe the changes within, and treat each fast as a sacred dialogue with your higher self. The insights, visions, and clarity that arise are not simply byproducts, they are the gifts the universe offers when the noise of consumption falls away. Ultimately, fasting is a reminder: we are not bound solely to matter, nor slaves to desire. Within us lies a hidden flame, a reservoir of subtle power waiting to be awakened. By turning inward, restraining the appetites, and listening in silence, we reconnect with that inner source. The true power of fasting is not in denying the body, but in remembering who we really are, a being of light, consciousness, and infinite potential. So, if you are ready, take this ancient key into your hands. Let fasting become more than a practice. Let it become a pathway, a gateway, and a profound journey into the depths of your own spirit.